Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Another Stevens and Stevens Monday episode here on Locked On Big Ten. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Locked On Big Ten, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Monday, May 10th. It is a Stevens and Stevens episode, and today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com right now and use the promo code. There it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. As I was saying, Jay, I lost the line there. Go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. If you saw that little blunder on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed. I lost a little liner there as I was switching in between the tabs on my internet browser. Anyway, a Stevens and Stevens Monday episode of the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Ben Stevens, Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes. And Jay, today we are going to act and help out our friends at BetOnline.ag. We are going to set approximated win totals for the 2021 college football season for each and every team, all 7 of them in the Big Ten East Division. Does that sound like fun to you? Because that's what we're going to do here on this Monday Stevens and Stevens show.
It does sound fun, and it's May here where I am in the Midwest. It's cold. It's down to like 40 degrees and rainy. It's ugly outside. The nice thing about today, with today being Sunday, day before this drops, it's Mother's Day. And I got to spend some time with my mom today and went up to Red Lobster. She picked the restaurant. We ate a little bit, talked a little bit. And like I told you, Ben, I lost track of time, so I was behind schedule. But all in all, it was a good time on Mother's Day, celebrating my mom who, well, I'm in my early 30s. And I know early on, when I got in teen years, 20s, and even now, there are some times I'm sure I gave my mom a headache, maybe a migraine or two, because of how much of a kid I was. And, well, I mean, kid is a kid. And I like today, enjoy today, celebrating her because she deserves everything she gets.
Shout out to all the moms out there, my mother as well, Lynn Stevens, and to Jay Stevens' mom as well. So, Jay, you're right. It is a Monday in May. There's really not all that much to talk about. So we look forward at these times. And although it is still kind of cold for whatever reason in May, which should be a crime in itself, we look forward to better times throughout the summer and then to the early portion of fall for the 2021 college football season. Today kind of feels like a early October morning when you wake up and it's Purdue and Northwestern at 10 a.m. Eastern or whatever it may be on ESPN2. So that's how we're kind of thinking about things. We're getting ready for the 2021 college football season. So like I mentioned, let's go through the Big Ten East and approximate some win totals that you might see for each and every football program in the Big Ten East division for the 2021 college football season. This is what BetOnline will put out there probably in the summer months in the next couple of weeks, maybe about a month from now, middle of June, that you can lay some wagers on and bet over under a win total set for your favorite football team. Jay and I are helping out BetOnline with an early head start on this and looking at the teams in the Big Ten East today. So, Jay, I think we start with your greatest area of expertise, although you know the Big Ten better than most, with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I think the line for Ohio State out of a 12-game regular season slate has to be 11.5. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. The way that Ryan Day has this machine rolling right now, the way that the recruiting is coming in, with the month of June being very, very big in recruiting, starting in just a few weeks from now, I think it has to be said at that, because with what Ryan Day has brought in for this season, changing of the defense, base defensive set is changing. There are a lot of good things going on in Columbus right now. The 11.5 seems like the ideal line. Whether BetOnline will have it, and I think you're spot on with that, Ben.
I think it's very interesting, right, to have 11.5. If you're an Ohio State supporter or you think the Buckeyes are a very good football team, which you probably should because they are, and you would go over 11.5, that obviously means they have a perfect 12-0 record through the 2021 college football regular season. That is going to be difficult to do. However, I think if you set the line at 10.5, everybody and their mother on this Mother's Day would take the over of that, because you're estimating Ohio State would at least get 11 wins. So I think the line, just in terms of the book getting some money, would have to be set at 11.5. And I still think, in the way that Jay and I kind of approximated some of these team win totals and based on the value, we did a quick scan of the 2021 schedule as it stands right now for each team. And you pretty much guess. You say, okay, Ohio State, Minnesota to open up a year. That's a win. Ohio State against Oregon, still probably a win. Ohio State, Tulsa, probably a win. Ohio State Akron win. So you see what I'm saying? You go through the schedule, you take your best guess, you think what is going to be a win without doing a full-blown deep dive into the matchup in the game and every roster. But that's how we approximated and guessed these team win totals. So that's why I think you set it at 11.5, because unless you're thinking completely differently, you look at what Ohio State has each and every year and you think, okay, that's probably 12 wins. They might, miss up somewhere along the line. It happens in a long, grueling 12-game regular season schedule in college football. So there might be a misstep somewhere along the line for the Buckeyes. But when you look at it on paper here in May, I think you think that's going to be a perfect 12-0 record.
Yeah, Ben, I am on the record. I stated it once. I said it probably a few times by now. It's May. I'll probably say it a few more times before the season starts. I think this is the year that Ryan Day loses his first regular season game while being the head coach at Ohio State. I'm not sure if it's going to be at home or on the road. Of course, you can only play at home or on the road. They have no neutral site games. But I do think at some point in November, early November, late October, I think Ohio State loses their first game. Yes, you can look up there and say, well, you got Minnesota on the road. I think Ohio State's quarterback, whoever it is, it's good enough to beat Minnesota. Oregon, they have a lot of talent, potential first round. I believe edge rusher, name escapes me right now.
Kayvon Thibodeau.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. But I still think they win that game. They're at home. If that was in Oregon, that might be a loss. But there's a team, I'll throw a couple of names out there. Ohio State goes on the road to Indiana on October 31st. They go, they're at home on October 30th. They play Penn State. Then they go back on the road to Nebraska Memorial Stadium on November the 6th. I think Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, those are all final three games. Those are going to be wins. But coming off that bye week, even though you're going to Indiana, that's a team that's getting a whole lot better, the Fighting Tom Allens, and they're looking to actually make some noise and beat a team that has beaten them quite a bit. Sean Clifford at Penn State, don't really trust him. Nebraska, not sure what's going on there. But that Indiana game, and I'm not wearing the hat because of that reason, but my mom went to Indiana University, so I wanted to honor her today with the hat. That game might be the one. And it might be the fact that Ohio State's linebackers are so young, well, inexperienced, not young as far as age, inexperienced is the proper word to utilize. Ohio State lost out on the recruiting battle via the transfer portal. Henry T, I can't say his last name, transferred to Alabama instead of Ohio State. And I think that might be the game that Ohio State ends up losing this year, going with the under. If it's set at 11.5, Jay's going with the under.
I think it's a smart bet to go with the under, expecting somewhere in a grueling season, especially once you get into Big Ten conference play, that Ohio State might have a loss on that schedule. But if you set it at 10.5, I think everybody takes the over, and you have to juice the over to a pretty big price. So we go to the next team in the Big Ten East. We're going through this based on the 2020 Big Ten football standings. The next team in the Big Ten East, the team Jay highlighted right there, where his mother went to college, and on his head today, Indiana University, IU, the football program that is on the up and up under Tom Allen. So, Jay, I looked at Indiana's schedule. I don't think it's inconceivable for the Hoosiers to possibly win 8 or 9 games, but I set the line at 7.5. What do you think of that number?
Let's go through this kind of out loud, Ben. I got this on paper, but I'm just going to go through this out loud with you. You and I we have fun together. So, open the season at Iowa, Idaho, Cincinnati, Western Kentucky, Penn State, then there's a bye week. So you can probably chalk off Idaho, Cincinnati, depending on, I think Desmond Ritter's a quarterback, and I think he came back in. I could be wrong. Your answer says yes. Western Kentucky, I mean, you could kind of put in 2, maybe 3 wins, maybe 4. I'm not really too big on Iowa right now. So I'm going higher on the Fighting Tom Allens than maybe other people. I already talked about how I think there's a possibility that Ohio State loses to Indiana that week. And Ben, I do think, say 7.5. Let's go 3-2 before the bye week, just to play it safe right there. Michigan State, probably a win. Ohio State, I'll say it's a win. What's that, 5? Maryland toss-up. Michigan toss-up. Rutgers, that's a win. 6. Minnesota. I mean, if we're going at 7.5, I'm going with the over because I think that they do beat Minnesota and they do beat Purdue. Purdue, a team that really the head coach is really trying to figure out if he can turn this thing around to keep his job. I don't like calling for someone to get fired, but you got to do something in West Lafayette or you may be out on the outside of the campus. looking in, trying to wonder and hope and try to figure out what went wrong so you can fix it going into your next thing. Over on a set at 7.5, coming off what they did last year with that momentum, that experience, and the ability that there's possibly fans in the stands this year. Not sure how many, but the possibility of fans in the stands. Ben, I truly think that we're going to find this Hoosiers team that is going to be on the over if it's set at 7.5 going into next season.
I would agree with you. I think they win at least 8 games. Indiana, had it been a full slate last year, probably would have been in the ballpark of winning 8 games in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1993, 1994 for that Indiana football team. So that would have been something, or maybe it was the 80s. Regardless, it had been a long time since IU had won back-to-back seasons of 8 games in a football season. So I look at this schedule for 2021. Like you, I think that first 5 games, but prior to the bye week on October 9th, is a pretty daunting stretch on the road at Iowa to start off this year. I think Iowa is going to be a good team in the Big Ten West. I actually think Indiana probably falls in that game. I think they get Idaho. Since he was a top 10 team last year that returns a lot of production under Luke Fickell, Desmond Ritter's the quarterback back. That's at home. That's going to be a great game, week number 3. I would give the edge to Cincy there. So I think Indiana goes 3-2 in that first 5-game stretch. At Penn State will be a very tough test for them as well the first week of October. So I have them 3-2 in that first 5 stretch, give or take a Penn State or Cincinnati game, maybe flipping there. And then they beat Michigan State. I don't think they beat Ohio State, even though it is at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. So I think that right there gives them 4 wins. I think they would get Maryland, get Michigan. Ooh, at Michigan, who knows? Maybe. But when you approximate these things, as you're going through the schedule, Jay, like I've been doing, and you call a game a toss-up. So that Michigan game late in the season for Indiana on the road in Ann Arbor in the Big House, I would call that a toss-up. So I put it at 0.5 as I'm making these lines, and you can kind of add all of that up. So at the end of the day, I agree. I think they probably win 8 games, but I think the line would be set at 7.5 for them, as our friends at betonline.ag might see it. So the third team up in the Big Ten East, a team we have talked about a little bit so far, the Penn State Nittany Lions. I set the line at Penn State at 8.5, Jay. I could also see an argument for 7.5 being the team win total for the Nittany Lions in 2021. What do you make of those two numbers?
If we're going with the 8.5 over-under number, Ben, I'm going with the under. I don't really trust this team as much as others do and others have. Losing some players. You had a guy, Micah Parsons, who didn't play last year, so that really kind of helped you as far as your development, getting some younger guys in there. You can use last year as a stepping stone and a building block to play a whole lot better than you did last year, because really last year was not good at all. It really didn't help that you play Indiana week 1, they have to go, and then you have to at home, but you have Ohio State week 2. That's really a tough way to start your season when you are already playing less games. You know, there's a huge possibility of a game or 2 getting canceled. I'm going with the under. I'm not calling for Franklin's job. Like I told you, I said it a few seconds ago, I don't like calling for people's jobs because I've been fired once before, and it sucks. It's fortunate for these guys in this profession, they can get fired and get a new job really quickly. I think we saw Richard Pitino. He got a new job. He got fired, got a new job, 24 hours maybe?
Yeah, literally.
It was really quick. So I get it. Their profession, they can get a new job. I personally, because I've been there, don't like calling for someone's job saying they need to get fired. But Franklin could very well need to have a come to Jesus talk maybe with himself, or someone on the coaching staff saying, well, if last year was last year and this year is not getting much better, what are we doing wrong so we don't do this in back-to-back seasons once again? Those kind of conversations, of him having those, that could be what really helps him prolong his tenure there at Penn State. Because, man, I just don't see it. I don't see it at all. It sucks. I like seeing Penn State win, like seeing them be successful. I really want to see every team in the Big Ten do well, so it's as competitive as people view the SEC. I just don't see it, man. I'm going with the under on this one.
I think it would be right around that 8. I think if you would set it at 7.5, I would go over. If you gave me the 8.5, let's go through the schedule quickly. They have a very daunting crossover schedule with the Big Ten West. They go at Wisconsin week 1, and then week 5, week 6, they're at Iowa. So very tough for Penn State in terms of the crossover in league. They have Ball State. They have Auburn in a game, non-conference week number 3. Villanova, that's pretty easy. But their first 6 games, Wisconsin, Ball State, I believe that is, Auburn, Villanova, Indiana, Iowa. I think if they can get 3-3 out of that, that's a pretty solid stretch. And I think that might be the best of what they get. If they go 4-2 there, I think you would see maybe 8 or 9 wins because they have Illinois at home. They have to go at Ohio State and at Maryland this year. So that's pretty difficult as well. Michigan at home, Rutgers at home, and Michigan State. So in there, I see about 8 wins, maybe 9. But I think depending on where you set the line, if it was 8.5, I would go under. If it was 7.5, obviously I would go over, right in that sweet spot of 8. And I think that's what Penn State will be focusing on this year. Like you mentioned, what does Sean Clifford do now in his 3rd year as a starter? They hope to see him take that next step under new offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich. He's not exactly designed for Yurcich's offensive system, so we have to wait and see what Penn State has. But some talent on that team, obviously. Not a great start to last year, a historically bad start for Penn State to go 0-5, but then rattled off 4 straight wins to end off the Big Ten football season. One of 2 teams, Penn State and Rutgers, that played the entire 9 games they were scheduled to for the 2020 Big Ten football season. So, Jay, the other team that played all 9 games last year in the return to Piscataway for Greg Schiano was Rutgers. We're moving through the schedule now in the Big Ten East. I did skip Maryland, so let's go to Maryland first. I have Maryland's team win total, Jay, set at 5.5. Do you think they could go over and get a bowl bid in Mike Locksley's 3rd year in Maryland?
So, Ben, I'm going to look at this very, very quickly. And not going to go through the whole schedule, just kind of highlight some games I think should be wins for them before the bye week. Let's say Howard, September 11th. That should be a win. Illinois is on the road in Champaign, September 18th, the following week. To me, that should be a win. Kent State, the following week. That's in College Park. That should be a win. So that's 3 wins right there, just because I think Maryland's offense, and I think Talia Tagovailoa is going to make a lot of people make their eyes pop out of their head with how talented he is. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. On the road at Minnesota, then you're home against Indiana, home against Penn State, on the road against Michigan State. I already got 3 wins. We're set at 5.5, Ben? Is that correct?
Yes, 5.5.
5.5. And I was thinking the over earlier because I really, really, really think this team is going to shock somebody. 1, 2. I'm going with the over still. I think they squeak out 6 wins and they're bowl eligible. I'm not sure how. It's one of those things like it's May, so we're a lot of speculation. I'm not sure how they do it, but I think the offense, and I think Tagovailoa can win them a couple games. And I remember there was a game last year. I forget who they played, but they were down. They had to fight back or a double-digit deficit, and you saw the
Minnesota.
Grind. It was Minnesota.
Yeah.
The grit, the grind, and just the determination to come back from that. I think there will not just be one game like that this year. There will be 2. And I'm not saying Tagovailoa is going to be a Heisman candidate. I don't think any quarterback at Maryland under this at this point in time will be a Heisman Trophy candidate. But those are the kind of games he's going to kind of wow people, and those draft scouts will look at this and say, "Whoa, we knew Talia could be good. He is good, and maybe he has a chance to get drafted maybe higher than some people expected because he's turning some heads and doing some amazing things over there in Maryland."
So I think when you look at the schedule quickly for Maryland in 2021, those first 4 games, they have West Virginia at home, Howard at home, Kent State at home week 4, and then their first Big Ten game on the road at Illinois. I think there's a good shot. I think you see West Virginia on paper and you're like, "Ooh, I don't know about that. They're a pretty good program." They've been struggling for 2 back-to-back years now in Morgantown, so I believe that Maryland could probably win that game at home. So I think there's a good shot the Terps can start off this year a perfect 4-0. And Maryland has got off to some fast starts in previous years to start off their college football season. Then it gets more difficult. Iowa, Ohio State on the road, at Minnesota as well. I think the games that will dictate whether they are bowl eligible for, based on a quick Google search, seems like the first time since 2010, will be the games on the road at Minnesota, on the road at Michigan State, and on the road at Rutgers to end out the year. I think Maryland can win those 3 games. However, being on the road in all of those spots makes it a little bit more difficult if they can get to that 6-win threshold to get to a bowl game, again, based on a quick Google search, which does not seem like Maryland has done since 2010. So that would be a very momentous mark forward for Mike Locksley in his young career as the Maryland head coach. So the next team up in the Big Ten East, Jay, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Despite a really good year in Greg Schiano's return to campus last year, 3 Big Ten wins for the Scarlet Knights in 2020. I have their win total for 2021 set at 4.5. So what do you think? The Scarlet Knights over or under 4.5 in year number 2 of the return of Greg Schiano?
So, Ben, before I get to the over-under number, I have to kind of make a little comment. I am on fbsschedules.com, and I thought there was a typo. So I go here all the time, look at schedules, look at opponents, dates, times, what network's going to be carrying the game at some points if I'm later in the week before game day. And it says their spring game is Thursday, May 20th, and I thought it was a typo. I seriously thought that was a typo because most of your Big Ten teams have already played their spring games. And I even messaged you, I think it was last week maybe, and I said, are we going to talk about the 2 spring games last week because they're going to be the same day as the last day of the draft, which I thought that was stupid. Like, you want your guys to be able to know, like, have the aspirations to get drafted. So you would want to have the draft off in case they want to watch the draft to use that as motivation. But no, there were a couple of Big Ten teams. I think Illinois was one. I think Nebraska was the other that wanted to have the spring games that day. It didn't make much sense to me. So that was the first thing I saw. That was a typo, but I don't believe it is. FBSschedules.com is normally really good at keeping things up to date. Ben, I'm going with the under. I don't trust Rutgers. I don't. I don't at all. Sorry, I know I would spend a whole lot more time on the spring game talk than the explanation for the over-under number. I don't trust them. I don't know what Greg Schiano's. I think Greg Schiano's a better defensive coordinator than he is as a head coach. I think a lot of coaches are better as coordinators than head coaches. I'm going with the under. I just don't trust it.
I think it's going to be difficult for Rutgers to get to the over. However, I don't think it's impossible. There is a lot of talent on this roster. Greg Schiano has recruited very well. At his second stint there now in Piscataway, has also hit the transfer portal very, very well. Has done a great job getting some experience into that team, even a lot of Big Ten experience on this Rutgers roster. So they start off with Temple on the road at my alma mater, Syracuse. I actually think they can win that game. I believe that's Delaware there, if I'm not mistaken, based on the logos that I see from the composite schedule I have from the Big Ten official site. Then on the road at Michigan. So that's where it gets difficult. They're going to maybe need to win those first 3 games in the non-conference, which I think they're capable of doing. They're crossover games of the Big Ten West at Northwestern, at Illinois, and Wisconsin, and then finishing off with Maryland to end off the year at home is not obviously a crossover game. But I think within those 6 games that I highlighted, there are potential for Rutgers to win those games. I would probably go the under as well. I think it's at 4 right now, but I think the total be set at 4.5. If you gave me 3.5, I would go over. I still think that there's a chance they could go over that 4.5. I really do think Rutgers could get to 5 wins. Can they be bowl eligible? That's going to be difficult just playing in the Big Ten East. So the next school up in the Big Ten East based on the 2020 Big Ten football standings is, of course, Michigan, who struggled mightily, historically bad across the board last year for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. But 2021 brings a different perspective and optimism to that, although Mo Linguist, their now former defensive coordinator, just became the head coach at Buffalo before even coaching a game in Ann Arbor. A great recruiter was Maurice Linguist. Now he's on his way to Buffalo, New York. So I set Michigan's win total for the 2021 season at 8.5, despite a porous 2020. Jay, do you think Michigan gets back to where we are more likely to expect them in the Big Ten East in 2021?
So I'm going to publicly apologize. This guy that I'm talking about probably will not listen to this podcast, but if he does, I still want to apologize to him. I was talking to someone Saturday, busy out doing some yard work, and I said that Cade McNamara was no longer on the team. I said all their quarterbacks already had transferred out. They didn't really have anybody, but as I'm looking right now, OurLads.com, another website that I check frequently for depth charts, they still have Cade McNamara on the team. So I would apologize to the young man that I was talking to in regards to the depth chart because, well, the guy you were talking about, he's still on the squad. 8.5 seems tough, Ben. It seems really, really tough. And I'm not saying it's because of the talent. I think there's dysfunction right now at Michigan that goes deeper than the recruiting, a coach leaving, or anything like that. And I think there's going to be games. I'm going to look at the schedule very quickly. I'm going with the under. And there's going to be games like, so Western Michigan to open the season. That should be a cakewalk. That should be a win. Washington, you're lucky that's at home because they went to Washington on the road. That would be tough. I think it's Northern Illinois the next week. That should be a win. You got Rutgers. That should be a win. But you got to go to Camp Randall. You got to go to Nebraska. I know Nebraska's not really the team they used to be, but that's still a tough place to play, and I think they'll go back to their sellout ways this season. Northwestern, Patty Fitzgerald has had these guys fighting. Michigan State should be a win, but Indiana at Penn State, at Maryland, Ohio State at home. Last 4 games are going to be tough. I am probably higher on Maryland than a lot of people are. And I think the dysfunction, think about this, Ben. So you say, let me go to. So at Nebraska, October 9th, the week before the bye week, everybody's thinking, I get an off week. I get to relax, kick my feet up, maybe not hit the weights as hard or hit the weights a little bit harder, not as much work on the field, maybe a little bit more film study, resting my body. I think the dysfunction in the program will come up and will be put on Front Street at Nebraska on October 9th. That could be a Fox game. That could be an ESPN game. That very well could be a 3:30 game on ABC because we all know ESPN wants to capitalize on the Michigan brand. Wouldn't it be amazing for Nebraska? Michigan comes to your place and you beat them. And then you see the dysfunction and things unraveling throughout that off week, that bye week. They come back and, they play okay. They don't play like the talent that they have on the team. I truly think the dysfunction that is there is going to be put on display for everyone to see. And I'm going with the under on this one because I don't trust what's going on inside that program.
I think a lot of people around this Michigan program would tell you that 2021, the expectations might be marginally smaller for Jim Harbaugh because they see this as the year to set up 2022 that could be the make or break year for Jim Harbaugh's tenure in Ann Arbor. I think it's right around that number. I think 8 is the sweet spot for Michigan. So I guess I would lean under as well. I do think they can get to 9. I think they can even get to 10 based on the schedule. It's not as hard as it was for them last year in 2020. The crossover games, yes, going to Camp Randall is going to be tough. At Nebraska, you would still give Michigan right now, if you were looking at it, that game on October 9th, if you were looking at it right now, I think you would still have Michigan being the favorite. That could very much change by the time we get to September. I'm just saying right now. Then Northwestern at home, probably a win. Michigan State on the road. A little dicey last year for the Wolverines, and I think Michigan State will be much improved. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but I still think you would probably make Michigan the favorite. They'd probably be the favorite over Maryland as well. Those games against Indiana, Penn State, and Ohio State, I think make or break what they do in that 8 or 9 game or 9 win total for Michigan this year. So I have 8.5 as the number. Like Jay, I would lean under by the hook, by that half game, because I think Michigan probably wins 8 games in 2021. The water's a little bit more calm, and then 2022 is the make it or break it year for Jim Harbaugh when you have guys like J.J. McCarthy, who's going to take over probably as the quarterback, Donovan Edwards in his sophomore year as well. The guys that Harbaugh had in this most recent recruiting class that are really his maybe final class at Michigan. So that to keep an eye on for 2021. The last team we have to get to, Jay Stevens, is Michigan State. The Spartans into 2021, year 1 officially of the Mel Tucker era, as our friends at Locked On Spartans will Hunter and Matt Sheehan, I almost blanked on their names there, tell me all the time. It is officially year 1 now because last year didn't count. It was year 0. So now Mel Tucker with a revamped roster, a lot of turnover in East Lansing this offseason. Guys hitting the transfer portal, guys coming in from the transfer portal. I think there's a lot more talent on this roster this year, Jay Stevens, for Michigan State. I have their win total 6.5. What do you think of that?
Ben, if we're going with the Locked On Spartans motto or the way that they view the Mel Tucker era, last year, year 0, kind of how the NCAA has week 0, it confuses me how you get to week 0, but I'll go with the Locked On Spartans, guys. Last year, year 0, year 1 this year. I'm saying bowl eligible. You're 2-5 last year, last in the Big Ten East. I don't have the Big Ten standings in front of me, but I venture they're probably towards the bottom, 13th, 12th, 14th, right there as well, as far as how last season went. I'm going with the under, but I do think this is a positive, a move in the right direction. Even if I'm going to say under, but I am saying that they will be bowl eligible. And I think after a year like that, like last year, I'm not even going to look at the schedule because I don't really care. We're going to find a way to get 6 wins. I'm not a big fan of the 6-win measuring stick or the barometer to say that 6 wins to be bowl eligible. I think that you should at least be 1 game above 500 and then say bowl eligible. At least don't make it average. I get 7-5 is average still, but it's still your record's not 6-6. You're not on the verge of having a losing record at the end of the season. Say you lose your bowl game 6-7 versus 6-6. So I get all that stuff, but I do think it's a move in the right direction. I think you get some things ironed out, get some of the kinks out. You get more of your system in there, and guys learn you. And I think that's the problem that we had last year. Not everyone knew Mel Tucker. Not everyone knew what he was trying to implement. So if you're a new coach, abnormal offseason, you're already behind on everything else. Everyone talks about Ohio State, how they're very, very vocal in trying to play. But part of the reason they played the way they did early on, and Justin Fields looked amazing week 1, week 2, was because he already knew the offense. In those Zoom sessions, he's somewhat teaching them. He's more asking explanation as far as why are we doing this. Those guys at Michigan State, they're merely trying to figure out and consume everything, offense and defense, to just know how to do the bare minimum in the system. So I do think it's a step in the right direction as far as year 0 to year 1. I think I'm going with the under for the over-under number for the win total, but bowl eligibility in year 1 for Mel Tucker, that, my friend, is a move in the right direction.
I completely agree. A lot more talent on this roster. Don't forget, Mel Tucker took over in the middle of February last year, about 2 weeks before the pandemic hit and shut everything down. So he had very little time to even introduce himself to his staff, to the team there in East Lansing. So I think it's a very different offseason, probably more crucial for Michigan State than a lot of the teams in the Big Ten. And it was a very important offseason for everybody after a weird 2020. So I think Michigan State has a lot more talent on this roster. I think they have a potential to be bowl eligible as well. The 6.5 number is intriguing to me. I think it's at 6, but I think the argument for 7 and over, which I know Will Hunter made on our spring football tour in East Lansing, I think that's also in the cards. I think they could potentially get to 7 wins this year because that talented roster is going to be a lot better in 2021. So, Jay Stevens, a Stevens and Stevens episode on this Monday, going through the Big Ten East, helping our friends at betonline.ag set some win totals for the 2021 college football season. I think that was a great thought exercise. We have a long way to go here now in the middle of May until we even get to the first game, potentially at the end of August in the Big Ten season. So, a lot to do, but a good time nonetheless here in May to set some Big Ten team win totals.
It is fun, man. It's fun to talk ball anytime, football, basketball, whatever it is. It's fun to talk it's fun to talk Big Ten sports. I mean, I've loved this conference my entire life. I have loved watching the athletes on display, just showing everyone what they can do on whatever field of play that they have chosen, and it's exciting. There's a lot of time between now and the beginning of the season. There's not as much time as that between the next time you and I will talk right here on Locked on Big Ten Bid. This is fun, man. Can't wait till we can do it again.
Always having a great time on these Monday Stevens and Stevens episodes. And Jay, I hope this sparks some debate around the Big Ten country and they can give us some feedback on our numbers that we set on these team win totals. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked on Buckeyes, my right-hand man here on Monday shows. Jay, as always, talk to you next week, my friend.